RTLZ World Pension Special wordt mede mogelijk gemaakt door Deltaloid. Kritisch op het juiste moment. Deltaloid.
Welkom bij de RTLZ World Pension Summit vanuit Amsterdam. Met dit uur onze levensverwachting stijgt. We worden ouder, maar daarmee stijgen ook de kosten van pensioen, van gezondheidszorg. U hoort het vaak en het lijkt een probleem, maar zijn er oplossingen? We praten erover met Doug Andrews van de University of Kent. Mr. Andrews, why is the aging of the population in most Western countries a problem?
Well, the aging of the population has occurred for two reasons. One, because women are having fewer children, but also because life expectancy is continuing to increase because of healthier eating and medical care and so on. At the present time, aging is not a problem because we're still not at the stage where people have retired. But as more and more people retire, we'll find that there are fewer people of working age that are able to pay taxes to help to support these workers. An example from the Netherlands that was quoted was in the last 41 years, the median age of a Netherlands individual has increased by 12 years, which is faster than the world on average.
And so those are 12 non-working years.
That's right.
Yeah. Firstly, how do governments react? Because it's costing them money, social security, even healthcare, things like that.
Well, governments can see that there are going to be continuing pressures, and so the natural way to react is to try to reduce the pressures by trying to reduce benefits, trying to shift costs to the private sector or to individuals, trying to raise taxes, although raising taxes is a very unpopular solution for all parties.
Yeah, and how do companies react? Because for them the costs are going up too.
Well, companies are trying to resist the cost shifting. One of the ways in which they are doing that is to make some of the benefit programs voluntary so that the employees will have to pay the costs themselves rather than accept the shift. And another way that companies try to protect themselves is through tightening up of contract wording to make sure that they know exactly what it is that they're covering and that they don't, for example, have to pay for new drugs. Biologic drugs, for example, are very efficient, but they're also extremely costly. They're perhaps 20 times more costly than the traditional drugs. And so cost management programs are things that companies are trying to introduce as well.
What we also see is that we go from a defined contribution system to from a defined benefit system to a defined contribution system, which of course limits the costs of a company. They know what they are paying, but which shifts risk to the employee.
Yes, in the pension world we've seen significant shifts from defined benefit to defined contribution, which do shift risks to employees, and we're starting to see that as well in the other benefit plans. And it's logical because the companies are trying to define their costs more clearly. But to make it most effective for the employee, I think it's important that the contributions that the employees have in savings plans are at the discretion of the employees and how they spend those contributions. Because for some employees, health care will be very important. For other employees, disability insurance may be more important. And so it's important to have choice for the employees in managing those contributions.
Yes, because you say employee benefit plans might be or are the solution for all the problems we spoke about. How can they be? Well, firstly, what do you mean by the benefit plans?
Employee benefit plans, I refer to disability insurance, drug and dental insurance, critical illness insurance. And I wouldn't say that they're the solution for all of the problems, but I think that they are one of the aspects of the solution that can help, because the problem is there's only so much money that can be spent, and we have to provide pensions, we have to provide health care, we're going to have to provide long-term care. And the important thing is that we spend the money in the most effective ways. And so
In the choice of the employee.
and by having the employee be involved in the choice of how that's spent, I think you get more efficiency and more effectiveness.
What could be choices? What could someone, in your opinion, what should be the choices?
An example of choice is with respect to drug benefits. Some employees may have quite high drug expenses, and so having control over their pot and what it's spent on would be more effective for them.
So they would have a huge amount put in Medicare, and someone else might choose, a healthy person might choose for a higher pension, or
Right. For example, someone with a chronic condition, for example, rheumatoid arthritis, would find that their quality of life was more greatly improved by having the money spent on biologic drugs to treat that condition, whereas an individual that didn't have rheumatoid arthritis would find that the money was better spent on dental care for their children.
now is that related to your job? Doesn't that mean that you break up your pension plans once you get fired or leave your job voluntarily?
The earning of pensions and the earning of employee benefits is related to your employment, certainly, but with the plans that are being offered now, there are the opportunities to continue those plans after employment leaves. Now, the premiums would have to be paid by the individual, and so there is a cost to the individual, but at least there is the opportunity to continue coverage.
Okay. Doug Andrews, University of Kent, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
In Singapore hebben ze een pensioensysteem waar de VVD in Nederland erg geïnteresseerd in is. Mensen sparen daar verplicht op een geblokkeerde rekening. We praten erover met Don Yeo van de Singapore Social Security Systems. Mr. Yeo, a private account with mandatory savings, why is that?
The government has always operated this system since independence in 1965, and the government has always had the philosophy that we have to rely on ourselves, we have to fund our own retirement rather than depend on the next generation.
Yeah, that's the system we have in Holland. Huh? So it's a choice that people save themselves for their own retirement.
That's right. So we now have a fully funded defined contribution system. That is the primary pillar for retirement savings in Singapore. We don't have pay-as-you-go state pension system like you do in Holland. Today the contribution rates for the young, 20% from the employee's wages and 16% from the employer. So that makes a total of 36% of wages. That might seem quite high. However, these 36% of wages fund not only pension benefits, but also housing benefits as well as healthcare expenditure benefits.
How does that work? People get housing and healthcare from the state?
Yes, so with the 36% of wages and contributions, they are actually separated into three different pots. The first pot is the pension pot, we have a housing pot, and a healthcare savings pot. About 23 percentage points goes into the housing pot, 6% goes into the retirement pot, and 7% goes into the medical pot. So 2/3 of that contribution actually goes into the housing pot. And what our members can do is to withdraw part or the entire amount of that sum and use it to purchase property, whether it's a private property or whether it's a government property. And in actual fact, many of the members do that, which is why in Singapore we have very high rates of home ownership, more than about 90% now, one of the highest in the world.
That is a big responsibility for you from the social security systems for all the pensions of those people. How do you cope with that? Because you are the gatekeeper, you have to look at how to handle risks, things like that.
So because it's a defined contribution system, the risk ultimately lies with the member. That is the basic tenet of the system. However, the government does step in to help in terms of the investment return. So our system is such that the default option is to leave the money with the Central Provident Fund Board. That's my organization. And it earns a risk-free rate of return that is provided by the government. That is a nominal rate of about 5% on retirement savings. Typically, 80% of members would actually be in that default option. However, we do give a choice for members who want to earn higher returns to invest their savings directly into the markets in a range of instruments like equities, bonds, in gold and so on.
But at their own risk?
But at their own risk. So if they lose money, then it will mean that in retirement, they will have to cope with a lower income.
It is typical that 80% does not want to take the risk. They want the safe...
That's right.
Yeah, but you said it's safe investments, low yields.
Yes.
That's also their risk. They have to...
Yes. I think that is one of the challenges in Singapore, to make sure that the return, we can give a reasonable return, but it's a return that is sustainable, and yet members are comfortable with the risk that they're taking on their monies. So we have been exploring other systems as well, in terms of studying whether we can introduce more private sector participation, such as through having aggregated private pension plans. And that has been a debate that has been going on for some time. However, at the moment, I think the sophistication of our membership is such that they would still prefer taking low risk with their money. I think one of the reasons is because I mentioned earlier that 2/3 of that contribution goes into buying a property. And in fact, in Singapore, the housing asset that they buy has in fact been a very good source of return and a very good hedge against inflation, because housing prices have appreciated considerably in the last 30 years.
Can this system withstand maybe a drop in housing prices?
I think this is something that the government has very much its eye on. The housing market in Singapore comprises of 80% government housing. So the government does play a very important part in that. Government policy in terms of making sure the supply as well as the demand of property is carefully balanced so as to ensure that property prices, while they may fluctuate in the short term, but over the long term, they will appreciate gradually at a rate of return that would at least beat inflation.
Last question, short please. Is this the system that the world should look at?
Well, I think Singapore is very unique in the sense that it is a very young country. It is a very small country. So I think it's difficult to generalize because I think in pension systems around the world, the political reality and the legacy carried from previous generations has to be taken into account.
Thank you very much, Ton Yeo, Singapore Social Security System. En tot zover vanaf de RTLZ World Pension Summit in Amsterdam.
RTLZ World Pension Special wordt mede mogelijk gemaakt door Deltaloid. Kritisch op het juiste moment. Deltaloid.